Hello, welcome to Talking Rubbish, a weekly podcast delving deep into the world of recycling and discussing the truth behind snappy headlines and one-sided stories. I'm James Piper, author of The Rubbish Book, and I'm joined by Robbie, my far from rubbish friend. And we are joined today by Rob Tilsley, our far from rubbish guest. Good morning, Robbie.
Morning.
I was on BBC Bristol, Robbie. I know you were in South Africa, so you won't have heard this, but I was on the radio the other day.
Yeah, we don't get BBC Bristol out here, unfortunately. Although I'm sure over the internet I could be streaming it and keeping up with local news.
Yeah, I should have let you know. So I was talking about food waste. This was such a weird story. There was a Harvard study that found that Gen Z and millennials were throwing away food before the best before date.
Why?
I honestly don't really know. There was this whole thing about like how previous generations didn't have best before dates. So they just sort of sniffed everything and looked at everything and worked out whether it was off. But for some reason, Gen Z in particular and millennials have kind of been looking at those as a safety thing. And they brought me on to talk about the fact that actually best before dates are a quality thing and used by dates are the safety thing. So it was just really interesting, just going back to our episode 9 where we talked about food waste and why cucumbers are wrapped in plastic. You know, it's so important we all get used to using our senses to decide whether food is off or not.
Okay, wow. So, presumably millions and millions of years of human evolution means that we can tell whether some milk's off or something.
Yeah, do you know my favourite adage about milk is you never have to sniff it twice. If you're going back for the second sniff, it's fine.
Okay.
You're going to know.
Okay, that's a good one. I didn't actually know that one. I'm going to steal that.
And do you want my favourite fact? We didn't get to on the radio. I was annoyed. We only had 5 minutes and I was like, I've got my favourite fact and I didn't get to roll it out. So this is a podcast exclusive.
You should have said it first thing. Come on, you know that if it's your favourite. What is it?
Most crisp packets in the UK go off on a Saturday.
Oh, yes, you've told me this before, like years ago. Why is it again?
I think it's because the production starts on a Sunday. Well, we're not Get Walkers in as an interview, I think, just for this. But I think their production starts on a Sunday, and then that means that, like, the end of the production week is a Saturday. So they just put everything is going off on a Saturday.
Okay, well, so I'm sure people at home will be grabbing their next bag of crisps and turning it over, checking the date and seeing if it's a Saturday, and writing in on Discord to let us know that you're absolutely right or absolutely wrong.
Well, I keep telling people this, and then we keep testing it. There are definitely some brands that do not conform to this, but most do. And so it is quite a cool little trick. If you're like, you've got a pack of Walkers in front of you, I promise that will go off on a Saturday.
Okay, there we go. Very good.
And we also had Lisa email in. So Lisa is the owner of a zero waste refill shop in Northern Ireland. And she loves the podcast and it was helping her to learn all about recycling and general waste management, which for someone who runs a zero waste refill shop is going to be pretty important.
Maybe they put it on in the shop, and we can be the background music. How about that for an idea?
Yeah, that'd be nice, yeah. Lisa, write in with the name of the shop. We'll do a little jingle for you. That'd be great. She had just listened to episode 29, which was about the bin collections and recycling rates. And what I loved is she was like, I feel compelled to write in and tell them about my bins. And it's like, that's our vibe, right? People just writing in and telling us about their bins. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. We love that.
She said her general waste bin is collected every 2 weeks. The green bin, which takes garden and food waste, is also every 2 weeks. Once a month, glass is collected along with those 2 bins. And on the alternate weeks, the blue recycling bin is collected, which includes drinks cartons, which does not seem to be the case across the board, as we have said. What was interesting is the council do spot checks on the bins and won't empty them if there's recycling in with the general waste.
Oh, what? So they won't collect your recycling? Or they won't collect your general waste if they can see that there's a recyclable PET bottle in there or something.
Yeah, she seems to be suggesting that if the general bin has recycling or food waste in, they will not collect it.
It's quite a good motivation, that. Leave you with a stinking general waste bin if you don't make sure that there's no recyclable stuff in there.
And they put a sticker on it to make you feel really bad so all your neighbours can see.
Whoa, public shaming. I like that too.
It's great, isn't it? Yeah, so thank you, Lisa, for writing. I mean, this was skirting the line of an addition and correction, I think. It was probably an addition, but, it was a whole different bin system. So if you're listening to this and you think I've got an interesting bin system to talk to Robbie and James about, let's add it in. New feature.
We literally are all ears on this one.
additions and corrections. So a few weeks ago, we talked about Teddy and his collection of chocolate tubs. Remember the 6-year-old Robbie had collected up all the chocolate Quality Street and Celebrations tubs?
Yeah, I remember collecting them up and raising money for charity in the process of recycling these polypropylene tubs.
Yes, there's an addition to this story because Teddy was given a bench made of his tubs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's an amazing bench because it's purple. Presumably they used a lot of the, which one's purple?
Quality Street, isn't it?
Heroes possibly as well. So yeah, they used those to make a purple bench. And it was just a really nice addition to the story. Although I was wondering, is that the best route for these tubs? As always, I like to rain on this parade. I was just thinking, is that the best use of the tubs? Because they are food contact polypropylene. So it did get me thinking what happens to these tubs, because I would have thought they could be used again in other areas. And I actually was asking Rap about this because I was intrigued as to what you could do with these tubs. And I guess you could use them for things like shampoo bottles, you know, where you've got like a darker shampoo bottle. You could use it for that sort of thing where, you know, you need to think about the packaging needs to be clean, ex-food grade type plastic. There'd be an opportunity to do that. But yeah, it seems to be the case.
Picking holes in poor Teddy's story, aren't you?
I'm sorry, Teddy. I'm really sorry. But yes, apparently in most cases it'll go into things like bins, crate boxes, furniture, guttering pipes, stuff like that, and potentially even in the automotive sector. So yeah, I think a lot of this, comes down to colour. You know, they're using purple and red in these chocolate tubs, and I know there's a bit of a call to how do we get those to be a clear plastic with like a label on rather than colour, because then they'd have way more uses in the recycled plastic sector. So again, it comes back to colour of plastic and how we go about reducing the different types of colours that are out there. Another addition and correction actually was a discussion on Discord that we had last night. Just as a reminder, we have our Discord, which is a forum or discussion about our podcast and about just the general world of recycling, to be honest. It sort of has taken on a bit of a life of its own. So if you want to get involved in any of those discussions, head on over to our Discord. The link is in our show notes. We'd said in one of our episodes, Robbie, that simpler recycling, it was the legislation episode, we were talking about simpler recycling coming in. We said it's coming in for all businesses this year. And actually, I had someone message who definitely has experience in this. They seem to have multiple sites, and they were saying, actually, we're looking at some of the exemptions. So they have some potential exemptions for simpler recycling. So we just need to correct what we said there about it coming in for all businesses. So what's your understanding of this?
Yeah, so this is the technically, environmentally and economically practical exemption, basically. And it means that waste management companies who can prove that it would just cost too much or lead to no environmental benefit, if they can lay out and prove basically that it's better to collect a few of these things together rather than separately, that you don't need to actually separate the waste. So it is true that businesses should be doing this, but in certain instances, and I hope it's only used few and far between, businesses can continue to collect stuff up together if it's more practicable to do so. We really do hope, though, that separate collection, particularly of things like food waste, and that people start collecting food waste, as many businesses don't at the moment, will lead to greater recycling rates.
Yeah, this is frustrating, I think, that, you know, because particularly where you've got a business with multiple sites, they're going to be tempted to use that, right? They're going to say, hey, look, I can't implement this in every store. You know, if you've got a supermarket, they'll just say, oh, well, it's not practical to do that across every store, when actually it probably is and probably should be done. So, yeah, I guess, well, let's get into this discussion with Rob, and maybe we can talk about some of these issues where you've got like multiple sites trying to do one single thing and how that, you know, how difficult that can be. And I guess coffee cups are a good example of that. So let's get into that discussion. But I think it's frustrating from my perspective.
Brilliant segue, James. Yeah, can't wait to quiz Rob on how we get all of these coffee cups collected in a uniform way.
We'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, EcoSurety, who are on a mission to rid the world of unnecessary packaging. They help brands navigate the tricky world of extended producer responsibility, but that is not all. They also collaborate on incredible recycling projects and consumer awareness campaigns, which is why they've offered to support our podcast. So if you're an organisation looking to make smarter packaging choices, check them out at ecosurety.com. And just as a reminder, we've mentioned Discord already, but if you want to get onto our Discord, we've got like 120 something people there now, which is amazing. So if you want to go onto our Discord, the link is in our show notes. It's super simple to use. You just click the link, set up a profile, and then you can start chatting with our recycling community. You can get hold of us on social media at Rubbish Podcast. Our email is talkingrubbishpodcast@gmail.com, and everything we discussed today can be found in our show notes, including our link tree, which gives you a link to all of our reports that we found on the topics that we're discussing. Okay, so today we're joined by Rob Tilsley. Rob, you work for James Cropper, which we said last week is one of the main coffee cup recycling organisations. So we're going to get really into the detail of how cups are recycled and how you think we can improve their collection. But before we get into that, do you want to give us a brief introduction to yourself?
Yeah, so I'm fibre specialist at James Cropper. So I've got responsibility for the fibre we use in the paper and packaging business. So that's everything from obviously the virgin fibre pulp and right all the way through to then the post-consumer coffee cups that, like you say, we recycle on site.
Okay, great. And just a history of James Cropper, because presumably you do things other than coffee cups, you do other fibre.
So James Cropper were actually established in 1845.
Oh, wow.
So we're an advanced materials and paper and packaging group. Obviously, the coffee cup side of things is within paper and packaging. So we're actually a specialist paper mill with a cup recycling facility. And sometimes people do get confused. They think we're a waste site, and we're not. We're a paper mill. Okay. But we obviously developed a way to recycle the coffee cup. So we're making very much premium paper and packaging products. We're a global business. So it's obviously one of the things that we do is cup recycling, and that enables us to put recycled coffee cups in products into many of the markets that we service.
Okay, great. So you were around long before coffee cups had ever been thought about, long before Hugh was driving around in his bus.
Yeah, I've been with the business 20 years now in a variety of roles. So the past couple of years I've been in this role. So obviously it was interesting when obviously Hugh was having his crusade against the likes of Costa and McDonald's. We were actually working with those people on how to recycle the cups that they use. So in the background, we knew that they were actually doing more than most to recycle those cups.
We felt, and I'm trying to cast my mind back because I was in the industry then, but to be honest, it was a long time ago. Hugh was in the bus in 2017, I think we said. And I remember kind of seeing the Costa guys the next day or that night, and it being like, right, what are we going to do to get out of disposables? What are we going to do to recycle what we've got? But your view is they were doing a lot before that even happened.
So once we developed the recycling plant and had that in place, we started with the offcuts from cup production. So in effect, that's the same product that cups are made from. It's just not post-consumer, so it's post-industrial. But obviously our goal eventually was to always get the post-consumer cups back to James Cropper for recycling. So we were working with those kind of people on obviously how we would do that.
Okay, so got into the coffee cup recycling from the offcuts and thinking this is production waste that we should really be doing something with. It's perfectly uniform, which is exactly what you want as a recycler, isn't it? And it's really easy to use. But what was the thing that made you take the step, and what happened and led to the kind of scale up? And also, how does it work compared to the rest of the paper mill? Is it like a separate process? Just describe the process a little bit.
Like I say, we make premium paper products. So the traditional waste routes for us are quite challenging and can contaminate our process and obviously cause lots of problems. So we needed to find a source of waste that was suitable for us. Now, the people in our T&I team identified cup material as a source that could be viable because it's used in food packaging, so there's no contaminants in there. There's no brightening agents that can impact colour. They wear a colour mill. So we recognised that. Then the challenge was, well, how do we get the plastic from the fibre? Because obviously we can't have plastic in our system. So I'm going to make it sound like it was really easy, but we developed a way to do that. And then we invested quite a lot of money in putting the plant on site. So it's on site in the Lake District with the rest of the mill, but obviously is on sort of the edge of production, because obviously the fibre has to go to the paper machine, so it has to be quite close to those. But basically, we, using chemistry and water, we actually developed a way that through pulping, we can allow the product to be pulped for a period of time, and then actually what happens is the plastic separates from the fibre. So the plastic then gets removed from the process, and the fibre goes through various cleaning stages, and then into storage towers that then feed the paper machines for if products have upcycling fibre in.
And we described it as just the same as a normal cardboard pulping process, which we talked about before on the podcast, but just taking a bit longer. Is that fair?
Yes and no.
It sounds like it's a bit more complicated than that, James, by the look on Rob's face.
Yeah, so it is a pulping process, but in effect, because we're removing the plastic, it is different. So we're using chemistry and obviously the temperature to remove that plastic, and then we've got to remove the plastic from the process. So,
okay, so is the chemistry breaking the plastic away from the paper, and then you're sort of sieving it out essentially?
Yeah, so the between the temperature of the water, the chemistry, and the agitation of the pulper, that allows the plastic to separate, and then the plastic flows to the top and gets removed.
Got it. Okay, that's great. And how many facilities in the UK? I think we said last week that we thought there were 4 facilities that do coffee cup recycling in the UK. Is that still the case?
Yeah, that's right. I guess, like I say, we're slightly different in that we're removing the plastic. Mm. A lot of people are pulping the cups, but not removing the plastic, so to speak. It then becomes part of the product that is then made out of it.
Ah, okay.
And when you say the premium product, does that mean if it's part of the product, they aren't as premium products that they're using because it's got bits of plastic in it? How does that work?
Yeah, so we're a premium paper mill, so the products we're making, so we're working with, luxury brands are a lot of our end users, so we can't risk any contamination, whereas actually there's a lot of products that are being, facilities where they can get away with a bit of plastic in there, if it's a more commodity type box board product. So the lower grade material, you can get away with a lot more contamination, which means they can take a lot more waste.
Can you give us an example of that where you could get away with it, so to speak? Like, are you talking like cereal boxes? What kinds of things?
So yeah, your cardboard, brown type board, obviously. The end use of those is, it's for packaging purposes. It needs to be fit for purpose. Doesn't have to actually look fine. If it's being overprinted as well, then you can get away with a bit more contamination than what we can.
So it'll be like speckled, those kind of bits that are in there that I can imagine when I think about like a naturally coloured board,
And that was part of our challenge. When we launched the recycling plan, very much the market still wanted recycled products to look clean and almost like they were made from virgin fibre. We have actually seen a shift with that, in that some brands do like it to look recycled.
Yes.
So which is good.
Okay, so and sorry, just to go back, you said you're a colour mill, and I made a note of like, what is a colour mill?
So in effect, we pride ourselves. We have our own colour lab on site. So what we will do is, obviously, a brand or a customer will have a product that they want to launch, but they'll want it in their own colour. So we will then match that colour and then make paper of that colour. So we have a team of people in our lab that they're colour experts, and we get matches for weird and wonderful things all the time, and that the guys are up against it sometimes to match a colour, but they find a way to do it.
Okay, so this is like when I've just painted a wall in my house, didn't know what the colour was because I'd recently bought it, so I chipped off a bit of the wall and took it to B&Q, and they colour matched it for a paint. That's the vibe. That's what's happening.
We are the
here.
paper mill equivalent of that, yeah.
You are the paper mill B&Q. Fascinating. Oh, I'm glad I asked. That's really interesting. I didn't know you did that.
Oh, that's amazing.
Okay, great. Yeah. And let's imagine a world where every paper cup was collected. So we're collecting 100% of paper cups, which is obviously a different world to where we are today, and we'll come on to that.
Yeah.
How many facilities do we need to recycle all those coffee cups? Like the 4 that we've got, are we there and actually they're massively under capacity, or is it like actually we need 50 of those?
I would imagine, I think there was a bit of work done recently around the problem in the UK was 3.5 billion coffee cups. So that's the UK alone.
Yeah.
We estimate that we could recycle 750 million of those. You could argue between the other facilities, have we got enough in the UK? Maybe.
But it's going to be close. That would be everyone at full capacity. So you know, those 4 facilities actually might be more like 6 to 8.
Yeah.
And we could recycle every coffee cup. Okay, that's really interesting. I mean, that's good to know, isn't it? That we're not a million miles off where we need to be. Okay, great. And so does that mean you're running, look, without wishing to get into the commercial sensitivity of it, does that mean you're running significantly under capacity because you're not collecting 750 million, or does it not matter?
So that's right. So from a cup side of things, we're obviously not taking anywhere near that. We are running the cup trim, so the offcuts from the cup production still as well, which is in effect the same product. So we're removing the plastic and the fibres going on, but we do have more capacity. We actually, the plant itself, so at the start of 2024, we put it on 24/7 running.
Okay.
And the feeling was obviously with mandatory cup take back, things like that, they would provide opportunities to get more cups to us. And then it didn't happen. But we are still seeing, we are seeing growth in the number of cups that come to us. And that's, with the likes of Veolia, Biffa, Ricora, and then schemes like the Cup Collective as well. We're seeing a growth. One of the challenges is, pre-COVID, we got quite a lot of momentum. And then obviously with COVID, things changed. Consumer habits have changed, so obviously McDonald's, all the fast food outlets are now doing deliveries to people's homes. All those cups used to be collected in stores. People maybe still aren't travelling as much, so there's still a long way to go. But yeah, we are seeing through various schemes, growth year on year since COVID, getting cups back to us for recycling.
Do you know, that's so interesting. We didn't talk about home deliveries last week, but that's such a good point that people are more likely now than pre-COVID, obviously, to potentially have a delivery at home of a cup, and they don't have a collection point at home. So it's a really good point. Are we seeing any councils move in the direction of collecting coffee cups? Is that something you expect to happen, or are we not anywhere near that?
I don't think so at the moment. I know there is through the National Cup Recycling Scheme and Cup Round. So there's the box scheme. So in effect, you can get a box and fill that box and send it back, and then that will be recycled with us.
So you could do that at a household level. I could order a box.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So and the Cup Round box is actually made at our mill using recycled coffee cup material as well. So that's like a closed loop solution there.
And you touched there a little bit on the cancellation of this mandatory cup take back scheme. So am I right in assuming that is a shame for you as a business, and you would have liked to have seen that come in?
It is a shame. What I would say is that because people were planning for it and had done a lot of work, that a lot of scheme, people have actually just carried on. And obviously within EPR, that's an opportunity as well. So although the mandatory cup take back has been shelved, there are things still happening that should result in more cups being recycled.
And I presume that producers of these cups, coffee shops, etc., are thinking if they can prove that the cups don't end up at people's homes in the household waste stream, that they can kind of get that netted off their EPR bill in some way, shape or form.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the recycling rate. Let's talk about that, because we talked about it in last week's episode. We said in the reporting, they're sort of reporting a 2.8% recycling rate. But that, as you've alluded to, they sort of say in the reports, we were working up to this amazing 2.8%, and then COVID happened and we've had a step backwards. that's the latest data I can find, because people are just reporting the pre-COVID data. What do you, what is the recycling rate at the moment in your opinion? Because you're saying it's increasing and going up. So that's really good to hear. It'd be good to get a view on what that looks like.
I would imagine it's probably quite similar now to that pre-COVID level.
Okay.
The challenge we have obviously is that I guess once a cup leaves the store, it's tough then to find out what happens with it. Obviously, Veolia, Biffa, Recor, all the waste merchants that are collecting, they're certainly pushing things and trying to get more and more businesses signed up. So it's certainly encouraging. So yeah, I would say we're very close now to that pre-COVID level, but it certainly seemed like COVID was, a momentum killer as such. Okay. And then, like I say, consumer habits changed and things changed. So,
and do you think there's a difficulty with that then in bin placement? We sort of touched on it last week that, they're putting bins in the coffee shops in the main, I think. And, certainly when we did Leeds by example, we put them out on the street and we collected a lot of cups from that. Just in terms of people's habits, they're buying a coffee from Starbucks or whatever. Are they likely then 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later to walk into a Costa to recycle it? I'm not sure. So do you see the direction of travel as kind of more on the street bins, or do you think actually this is a consumer behaviour piece to go, guys, just go back into one of these participating members and drop your cup off? It can be anyone.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, it's probably a bit of both. If the consumer knows that these cups can be recycled, then they might make a bit more of an effort to do that. But also if there were bins there that were purely for cups, then that certainly makes things easier. I know part of the Cup Collective scheme, for example, in Dublin, they've actually rolled out a unit where obviously cups can be stacked, liquid can be put, and then lids can be put in another scheme. So there are things out there that means that the cups can be segregated and not just mixed with other recycling or general waste. So I think that would, if people can see that on a high street, then that would start to drive consumers to probably look to recycle more cups.
Just talk us through with what liners are you looking for? And on those cup collection bins, what the best practices? Does the lid go separately? Obviously you don't want the liquid in the cup and things. Just talk us through how you think that should best work.
Yeah, so with the cups that we take at James Cropper are the traditional PE lined cups, and our process is purely designed to obviously remove the PE layer, and then the fibre goes towards our paper machines. So the compostables, the aqueous coatings of this world, we cannot take. And the reason for that is that the coating in our process actually breaks down. So it doesn't separate from the fibre, it actually becomes part of the fibre. And the coating then doesn't take dye. So obviously as a colour mill, that causes us a problem. So you would have a nice black paper being produced with lots of little fine specks with no dye on. So obviously that wouldn't be acceptable for our end users. So that's the reason why we can't take them.
Okay, so we didn't really talk about aqueous coatings last week. We said we'd talk about it with you here. So just to explain that to the listener, so, basically from what I understand, you're spraying on or you're coating the plastic basically. So you're spraying it on to the paper. Is that right? What is there anything different?
That's
to that?
Right. So it's we call it dispersion coating. So instead of almost like a plastic layer, it's a coating rather than plastic. So in effect, that in our process, that coating just actually breaks down.
Okay, I had a bit of an argument on Instagram with I won't name them, but a manufacturer of one of his cups who had put on their website 100% paper and plastic lining free. And it was the most confusing messaging because you've basically said plastic free, but it isn't. It's got a coating on. It has to have a coating on. A bit of digging shows that coating is aqueous. So, of course, they say aqueous coating, not plastic coating. So do you think that's it felt to me, I can be quite honest about that, it felt to me like it was quite misleading. They're saying plastic lining free to give the consumer the impression that is plastic free. But in effect, what they've actually done is sprayed it with some plastic or bioplastic or something that is giving it that coating that now has made it unrecyclable. So how do we deal with some of that kind of messaging?
What I would say is that other mills, other facilities may still be able to take those cups.
Okay.
So they may be recyclable. It's just for our end users and our products, we can't take them. So I think I agree with you. In effect, it becomes very confusing for people who want to do the right thing. They don't necessarily, they want to do the right thing. They think they're doing the right thing, but actually, are they in practice? So, like I say, for us as a mill, we cannot take them. Other mills may take them. I question where they end up at the moment. They're probably more than likely to go for incineration, something like that.
And I mean, all recycling, as our listeners will know, comes down to economics. And my understanding is, well, again, without wishing to get into the commercial sensitivities, logically, my logical leap is if you are creating a premium product, you can offer the best rates for recycled cardboard. So economically, I guess, you are increasing the value of a cup compared to if it's got an aqueous coating where it can't be recycled. Is that could you just summarize the economics for us?
Yeah, so basically, we recognize obviously the value of the fiber from this material. So we actually do pay for the material to come here. And that's actually quite a shock. I speak to a lot of businesses and they're expecting to actually pay us to recycle them.
Okay.
Whereas actually it's the other way around. We pay for this material to come to James Cropper because we see the value in the fibre.
And that's only if they can guarantee that it's got this polyethylene lining and you're really certain about the quality of what... And it's just unbelievably uniform. So I imagine it's only Costa cups or only McDonald's cups kind of thing is what you're expecting, rather than these bins that say, we were talking earlier about putting around the town for any old coffee cup to be put into might be a bit more problematic for you because you can't be sure whether they're going to be a PE lined cup or an aqueous coating. You would much rather it was like a brand specific one, and today you were just sorting through loads of purely Starbucks cups, and maybe there was the odd one that wasn't Starbucks but kind of mostly just one brand. Is that fair?
Yeah. So that's the pick. We're quite looking at the big brands that, Starbucks, Costa, Pret, McDonald's, etc. The cups that they use are the PE line ones. So obviously we know that they're fine for our process. There are a lot of other cups out there, made by the big producers that are the PE line cups. So your smaller independents can use PE line cups. Our canteen at the mill obviously uses those cups that then once they're used on our site, they just go for recycling. So you are right. There is a risk, obviously, in the cup bins. If you put them out there, there are cups that we potentially would not be able to recycle. What we have always said is that if there's a very small percentage within a bale of cups, then we will always look to work with it. If it was a full bale, then the risk of contamination for our end products is too great. So that's where we are. So again, you say about the Starbucks cup, so that's perfect. Obviously, it's white and it's PE lined, apart from at Christmas when all of a sudden it goes red and green.
So you don't like that then?
So it is interesting because we don't do any bleaching or de-inking in the process. So if we run several bales of Costa cups, for example, the fibre does have a slight pinky hue to it.
Wow, okay.
So obviously, if we've got to consider that when we're selling products with cups in, that if a customer wants a white paper but we only have Costa cups available, then they've got to be prepared that it may have a slight pinky hue to it.
That's so interesting. And so, okay, so just to summarise then the economic piece, it is your belief that if a bale was mostly compostable or aqueous coating, essentially the company's going to have to pay to get those recycled because the value that's coming out is going to be quite minimal. And if it's PE lined, you can pay for those cups because the value is in the cup.
Yeah, so like I say, other facilities probably do take the compostables and aqueous coated. We just can't take them at the mill.
But if they're being incinerated, that's got a fee to it. So,
yeah, exactly.
So they're not paying for those cups. They're having them taken away for a fee. Okay, great. And I guess that leads me to a bit of a I don't know if it's a controversial question. I'd just be interested in your view on it, because we talked about it last week and we said, look, we need to make sure we ask Rob about this, because I guess you've got a material here that is quite public focused. People really do care about coffee cups. So it has led to a huge amount of innovation. I mean, possibly the most innovation in terms of packaging, in terms of people going, I can solve this problem. I can create a liner that isn't plastic, is compostable, will just break down if you throw it in your garden. You know, all these messages that come out there. And we're talking to you thinking, but hang on a sec, that now affects the recycling process and means that those cups have gone from a high value to no value, you know, and so whether we think that's a good thing or not, you know, the economics of recycling are so important for us always to talk about and recognise, because what you want to do is put a product on the market that's got a value at the end of its life. But in this instance, where we've got quite a low recycling rate of, you know, 3% or something like that, I guess the question is, is it better to just go, well, there's no point recycling any of this because only 3% is getting recycled, so we'll just move everything to compostable because that could, you know, because at least then something might happen to it? Or is it better for us to go, no, we want to standardize coffee cups because we want to turn that 3% to 50% recycling, and that's what we should be doing? Do you see my question? Like, I don't think I've ever come across a product where there's a big decision as to how you make that product, and that decision should be linked to recycling, and the recycling rate's really low.
It is interesting because obviously when we designed the recycling plan, the process for us to recycle these cups, you know, we're talking, when was it, 10 years ago? The majority of the cups out there were PE-lined cups, and obviously now you've got a whole myriad of cups available. Now, obviously, like we say, the bigger brands, which is still a big share of the market, are still using the PE line cups. So therefore, we should keep getting more and more cups back to us. But yeah, I suppose when you look at the food packaging altogether, there's so many different grades, there's so many different products available. Whereas, you know, if one product was mandated, then does it make it easier to recycle? Whichever way that may be, whether it's a PE line board or a coated compostable board, then actually does that make it simpler? But that would have to come from government legislation. So, you know, I know DEFRA have been involved in, obviously, you know, the EPR, and, you know, I sat on forums with them, you know, saying what our point of view was. But obviously, when it comes to products, people look to be different. And that's part of the challenge, is that if something is mandated to be, at what point does someone then still look to be quite different? So that's part of the challenge.
And what about, like, we talked about Vegware last week, because obviously they have a cup that is compostable, and then they say, look, we've tested it and it can be recycled, and that testing seems pretty good to me. Yeah. You know, what is that slightly different, or is that within your compostable space?
So again, like I say, because we're quite unique as a mill. So traditional waste routes, obviously, we can't use them. So your best white ones and things like that, whereas a lot of mills can. So when we say we can't recycle them, that doesn't mean they're not recyclable. It's just we can't recycle them at James Cropper. And obviously our process is all about upcycling. So we're removing the plastic gets recycled, the fibre gets turned into premium paper products. So that's where we're different. So we do get to, going back to Robbie's point before, how we would want the cups coming to us. So we are seeing, for example, I get sent products regularly, you know, weird and wonderful coatings. Can we take it? Can we? But ultimately coatings all behave the same. They break down in our process.
Yeah.
So there are now bio-based PEs out there instead of oil-based ones. They actually behave like PE, so they can still go through our process. We're actually seeing a lot of testing for new fibre-based lids, for example. So obviously that would then mean a consumer doesn't even have to take the lid off. They can just put the cup into a recycling bin. So, and again, a lot of these are actually okay for our process. So it just depends on the product. One of the products we recently tested it was a purely pulp cup, no coating, no plastic, but what it did have in there was obviously a wet strength agent to stop the cup breaking down. Now, the challenge for a paper mill is once you add a wet strength agent to paper, it's then designed not to break down when it's wet. Well, what we do with these is repulp them. So if they don't break down, then that causes us massive problems.
Wow, okay.
You're stuck in a loop with this bloody thing that just won't be pulped down.
So it's interesting you mentioned the lids, because I'd read in I think it was the National Cup Recycling Report, they were saying 98% of lids in 2019 were polystyrene. Is that still the case, or have people moved to other plastics now?
I mean, just from my experience, whenever I get one of these cups, I tend to get plastic lids with anything.
But made of polystyrene, though, because those are obviously not going to be recycled.
No, so
as opposed to
it's interesting. I would love to see if pulp lids do become the norm. Will that increase the rate of recycling? Because does someone having to separate the lid from a cup stop them recycling? Do they then just put it in general waste rather than recycle it? So it will be interesting, but I know probably that a lot of the lids obviously don't get recycled at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, we see that, don't we? Where like half a product is recyclable and half a product isn't. It can have that kind of emotive angle to it of like, oh, what's the point? If you take the average consumer, it's like, well, if this isn't getting recycled, I might as well not bother with the other half. And you do have that sometimes. So yeah, it's a really interesting point to pick up on.
And just diverging slightly from cups, what's the difference between like a cup and one of those like paper or card food trays that you'd see at a food market or whatever, for example, because that's got a plastic coating, hasn't it? Would that be the same in your process, or is that actually something different? And why does the cup get picked on, but not that sort of takeaway food tray?
So it's interesting because in effect, so the pulps that we use at James Cropper are all chemical pulps, and they're bleached pulps. So that means they're basically white. And a lot of the food trays that you see that are the brown craft type product, they're obviously unbleached, which we don't use at James Cropper. So even if they're PE lined unbleached fibre, we couldn't take them because it's unbleached. And a lot of the food packaging that is used in the industry actually has a level of what we call mechanical pulp. So like I say, we only use chemical pulps on site. So if there's a high level of mechanical pulp in a product, then we can't take it as well, because that, similarly to the coatings, it contaminates our process, and the mechanical fibre doesn't take dye as well. So again, that causes us problems. Now, even the cups that we take have a low level of mechanical fibre. So we obviously deal with that. So anything 5% or less, we would still take, as long as obviously 95% of it is the chemical pulp. So we can deal with small amounts of mechanical, but obviously if there's a high level of mechanical and then unbleached as well, then we can't use that.
And you've mentioned it a couple of times as we've been talking, and I noticed an article that you are actually doing something with the plastic liner, because one of our frustrations with the coffee cup recycling process that I don't think we really touched on last week, but we have talked about in other episodes, is that microplastics may then enter the wastewater because you're removing the plastic liner. You're not recycling it. It just goes out as part of the waste of the process. It's going to break down into a microplastic. You guys are unique, I think, in that you're doing something with that plastic. It'd be good just to understand what it actually becomes.
So when we first started the process, obviously the plastic was coming out from the process, and that was actually, it was going for incineration. So we recognised straight away, we're doing something good here in recycling the cups, but it can be better. So we worked with a waste partner, so a company that basically does deal with plastic and it can be recycled. What the challenge was, that when the plastic was removing from the process, obviously it had quite a lot of moisture on it, and it did have some fibre on it. So we had to work to improve our process to basically remove as much moisture and as much fibre from the plastic as possible. So we did that, and then that enabled us to send it to a company for recycling. So they're actually turning it into plastic pellets, which then gets used in the production of things like agricultural stretch wrap, cable ties, garden furniture, things like that.
No, that's amazing. So you're just literally squeezing out more of the moisture out of it through your process so that they can actually do something worthwhile with it. How long did it take you to get through that process? Was it like one of those things where engineers were working at a problem for years and years and years?
It was a labour of love. We realised that we had to get to that point. So it was. We kept making small improvements, but not enough. So we just kept working at it. And then probably, I would say 2 years ago, we got the breakthrough. And then for 2 years now, the plastic has been going for recycling as well. So obviously we're using the fibre and now the plastic is recycled.
Whenever we have a guest on, we like to get them to recommend a gift for a listener. So, have you got anything in mind that we could offer to our listeners, and we'll get them to follow us on social media, and then they could be in a chance of winning it?
Well, I was just thinking, even though we can't recycle it, how about a reusable cup?
Lovely. I think we gave away a reusable cup on the last interview, didn't we, Robbie? So
that's good though.
We're doubling up here.
I know it's something that people like.
Yes, that's right. We'll do a brand other than Elephant Box. So if you didn't win the Elephant Box Cup, then you've got a second opportunity to get a cool reusable cup. So I think we'll give away a Yeti cup, because that's the one that I've recently got. I've got one of these like metal Yeti ones that I absolutely love. Super easy to carry around. I just think they're great. So let's give away one of those. So if you want to be in with a chance of winning that, just follow us on social media, which is @RubbishPodcast. It will be on Instagram. Like the post with Rob's face on it, and then you'll be in with the chance of winning it as long as you're following us and you've done that. Rob, I ask every guest of ours the same question. So if you had an environmental superpower, what would it be and how would you use it?
I guess for me, it's something that I do see is that almost let's cut the crap. What is the right thing to do, and let's have consistency around that message. Let's not confuse people. Let's make it easier for people to do the right thing, because I do think 99% of people do want to do the right thing. It's just they don't know what that is.
It sounds like the superhero is going to be like Super Comms Man or something.
Yeah. So your superhero power is cut the crap, which I like, by the way. What kind of messaging do you think really confuses the consumer? What would you actually be cutting here?
I think there just needs to be a level of clarity. I for example, a compostable cup. Great, I'll put it in my compost pile at home. Well, a lot of the cups are actually only compostable in an industrial composter. So again, is that made clear? Would that drive people to make a different decision if they knew that? So it really is about let's get facts out there and let's people allow themselves to make decisions based on facts, not mixed messaging.
Yeah, I said to Robbie, we mentioned it last week, I went to Cornwall and they had a cup that had on it, I think it said, I'm going to get this wrong, but it was something like recyclable, biodegradable, compostable, just bin it. And you're just like, it's awful, absolutely awful. So
you really hate that cup, don't you?
I hate that cup because it's been mentioned 3 times now. I hate that cup because it's just like, what are you trying? It is probably industrial compostable, not home compostable, because they've got the just bin it message. It's definitely not going to be industrially composted by me just binning it. It's definitely not going to be recyclable by me just binning it. And it's not going to biodegrade by me just binning it, because it's either getting incinerated or landfilled. So the 3 messages, compostable, biodegradable, recyclable, are all rendered a lie by the final message, which is just bin it. And that for me. So I guess what you're saying then, just to be clear on your superpower is, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So let's just check in on this. I think you're saying your superpower is maybe there's 2 or 3 different types of cup, but on them is the message, this cup is PE lined and can be recycled and is worth X pounds a ton. This cup is compostable and needs to go in this bin and will become this. This cup has an aqueous coating, which means it has less plastic on it, but is not worth as much when you recycle it. So you would say, well, legally, you can only put those messages on your cup. You're one of those three things.
Yeah.
So that everyone understands, and you're not going around saying, I'm plastic free, or I'm this, or I'm that. It's just clarity in the messaging that is to the consumer.
Honest and clear messaging. Yeah, I guess whatever the product is, then let's cut the crap. Let's have honest, clear messaging so that people do actually know what they need to do with a cup. And then obviously it can extend further what they can do with other things as well. Let's have a clear message so that people know exactly what they are doing with a product. And hopefully that will then increase recycling rates.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been, I'm loving, as I said last time, I love doing these little series of like we do an episode on something, then we interview an expert, and then next week we're going to do an episode on the reusable cup schemes, which, Rob, I'm sure you've got an opinion on, but we're trying to just kind of, it's a 3-episode coffee cup, series. What do we call this? A little
extravaganza. Yeah. Although the one thing I will say about that, Rob, absolutely brilliant. But your rubbish process was much better than most of mine. So now I'm as ever nervous that James has found a new co-host. And you've also got a similar enough name too. Robbie becomes Rob.
Would anyone notice? That's the question.
They'd notice because the quality would go up.
Thank you so much, Rob, for joining us today. And thank you for just imparting so much wisdom and really helping us understand how a coffee cup recycling process works. I've really enjoyed that. Robbie, I will see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.